Let's just start off where you were at before the program. What caused you to trust random stranger on the internet?
Yeah, well, it's been a long habit of mine to trust random strangers. No, honestly, Josh, I mean, I found the program, I guess, about a year ago, or maybe a little over a year ago. I was just kind of searching online, searching YouTube. I think it was YouTube or Instagram, one or the other. But I came across some of your videos on there, and I found myself just kind of like watching a lot of them, late at night. It's probably a similar story to a lot of other guys where they're sleepless night and they're just like, well, I got to find something to do. And so I found, some of your content on there, and it struck some chords with me. It definitely started sending some alarm bells off in my head. There was a lot of new insights, I guess you could say, and then there was also a lot of kind of like reminders, good reminders, like, hey, you you have neglected all these areas that you worked hard on, in the
Mm,
past, so to kind of develop yourself. And so when I started kind of diving into a lot of just the YouTube content, I said, well, you know what? I might as well, you know, give this a shot and see what's going on. Joined up, did some of the content early, did some of the meetings, things like that, and made some quick progress. But probably as I have seen with other guys, in the group posting, they get in, then they get out, and then they get back in, they get out. And so I was probably like a lot of guys in that I was fully committed for about a month, and then I was like, okay, well, things are starting to look up, and everything's good now. And big mistake, big mistake to anyone that happens to ever see this if it's replayed. It's a big mistake. You got to really stick with it. And I'm still, going through a lot of the coursework myself. I find myself back and forth between stage 0 one day, stage 5 the next. As the dual mindset goes, the insanity flows with my
I like
wife.
that one. I like that one. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, it's a daily practice. I mean, it's a daily discipline. And to make a long story short, things regressed over several months, over a period of time, not really doing things to work on myself, letting myself go, letting myself fall apart again, engaging in some drinking behavior and things like that I should not have been engaging in.
Right, right.
And, it all came to a head August 1st, where, my wife came home and was just like, I'm done. Like I'm gonna take Violet, our daughter. I'm gonna take our daughter, and we're gonna move back to Pennsylvania, and we're gonna go live by my parents, and just let me go. Let me take my daughter and let me go.
Hmm.
And at that point, it was like, all right, all hands on deck mentally for me, and I had to decide to make some changes. Re-engaged in the program, reached back out, was able to get involved again, thankfully. And from there, I just started really kind of diving into the content and doing, the work again. And for me, I'm the type of person I have to do it over and over and over and over again for it to register and to fully absorb into me. And I found myself, watching the first video or replaying it in my car, whatever, constantly, and then the second video. And it became just a routine, a way of life, I guess you could say there. And it still is. I'm kind of at a point where it's like, all right, I gotta really, because now I'm doing the attraction mastery blueprint as well, and I'm still doing the other program, the marriage reset program too. And it's like, all right, well, now I got to figure out. I'm kind of trying to figure out, all right, how do I balance this out and keep making progress, because there's still a long way to go, as far as where I
Well,
want
it's
to
never
be as
ending, right? Like, yeah, like
yeah,
it.
it's that. Well, yeah, it is. You're right. I mean, you gave the best analogy that I've heard. It's, you don't work out every day and achieve a perfect body, and then you're done.
I
You gotta
wish. That'd be
Yes.
nice, right? That would be nice.
Yeah, it would be great. And it's the same thing with with marriage. I mean, I'm just getting to a point where she's receptive to me being, slightly physical, with her. I mean, and we're not all the way back to where I want to be, but it's like, okay, well, yeah, well, I can grab her ass now, and I can do different things, that I couldn't do, without just being looked at with total, freaking disgust. Um,
I mean, but you went from that place of like total disgust. Like, did she say, what was some of the worst things she said? Like, never, you're never going to touch me again. Like, what?
I never let, yeah, I never really loved you. I'm never going to let you touch me again. I'll never have sex with you again. Just this will never work out. I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the other things. I think
Probably
I've
more that
mentally,
just, yeah,
yeah, I mean, some of them I've mentally blocked out, but I mean, yeah, it was bleak to say the least, and I it's been rocky. It's been rocky for a few years,
yeah,
and I kind of have had my breakdowns, I guess you could say, emotional breakdowns with her in the past over some of this stuff. And I think as I re-engaged in the program and really just started kind of just having it on repeat all day long, constantly, I think it really started having a mental shift. It started shifting me mentally, started getting into my subconscious, and then it started manifesting in my conscious actions. And I reached a point where I honestly just became kind of like, you know what? Hey, if this works out, great. If it doesn't, great as well. Because I'm starting to notice lots of other women again, and they're noticing me, and I'm not like the most handsome guy in the world, but I know how to attract. I used to know how to attract women pretty well, and going through this started setting off a lot of reminders where it's like, hey, you know how to do this shit. You've attracted beautiful women before,
yeah,
and this program really kind of crystallized a lot of things for me and introduced lots of new things as well, of course. But
yeah,
it started reinstilling, rebuilding confidence. And as I started doing the work, started, like I said, just started noticing other women again, started noticing them noticing me. And I was like, you know what, things will be perfectly fine. I've gone through breakups before. I was in an 8 year relationship. We lived together for 8 years with this other woman, and it was extremely toxic, extremely abusive. But it's like, but I came out of that. Now granted, I took the long way coming out of that by going, down the drugs and alcohol path, and a lot of nonsense that thankfully is in the past. But to go back on what we were saying, going from like August 1st, where she was like, I'm done, I'm moving back, to now, it's like it's a night and day shift in terms of her energy towards me. I'm welcome in the bed again, I'm welcome to sleep in the bed again. Um, and quite honestly, I don't. There's a lot of times where I prefer not to, because I'm kind of just like, you know what? It's kind of nice just going in and enjoying and having, the downstairs TV room to myself and
yeah.
just kind of watching what I want to watch. So
Would
it's
you
not,
say
not
like, I like to focus on the internal wins, and we're going to, there's so much, the wealth of things that I want to tap into. But before we do that, I just wanted to put it like a button on
sure.
the other side of the coin, which is like what worse. So some of the best wins is that she lets you sleep in the bed. She's like allowing you physical touch. Like, what are some of the best external wins before we dive into the internal?
External wins. I mean, just allowing me to do nice things for her again. Like she didn't want anything from me. And then it's like, hey, you know, I have my eye on these flowers, giving me hints of, again, of like normal courtship behavior. That, I guess that's an example of an external win.
Yeah,
Allowing
yeah.
me to,
That's between the
would
stage
that be
three,
one?
which is accepting the influence, right? And like,
Hmm.
yeah, just accepting your influence. So there's a lot of things you said there. Let's touch on the first one because a lot of guys would get confused when they hear this, which is like you started talking about, you started noticing other women. A lot of guys, some guys might be like, wait, but you're looking at other women. It's like, no, right? Here, let me try to
No.
elaborate on that, and then you can dive in here too with me, Chris. So like if we're going to look at this from a very simplistic perspective, a lot of the guys who don't have their boundaries with their wife, who lost respect from their wife, they're completely dependent. Like, I need her to fill this hole in me, right? And she senses that neediness. And so
Yeah.
you noticing that you could attract other women, you have that capability, but then choosing to commit to this one woman, that's where
Mhm.
the power is, right? And that's what she feels like. Yes, he sees value in himself where he could leave me, but he chooses
Yeah.
not to, as much as she could do the same, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I have I don't I can't remember specifically which videos or which modules there were there kind of in some of the earlier phases, but some of them left an impression upon me where I realized, you know what, I'll be perfectly fine if you want to go. And so when she would, verbalize things, like, hey, I'm leaving, or hey, I'm going, or oh, I need to leave, or this place sucks, I hate living here, my reaction genuinely was not an asshole indifference, but a healthy, like, I understand completely, and let me know what I can do to help you out.
Hmm.
I'll go find a place for you right now. You want a new apartment? Let's go get you a new apartment. You're the daughter. You're the mother of my daughter. I'll take care of you because you're the mother of my daughter, not because I want to win favor with you, but you're the mother of my daughter. I have to make sure you're taken care of and that you still live in a decent place, and I want my daughter to have a good home that she goes to when she's with you, so yeah, absolutely. Let's go get a place right now, and, and it's not a place of like, I'm not coming from a place of fuck you. I'm coming from a place of let's move forward. Let's move forward and live our lives, and we can go forward with that. I was not capable of that 6 months ago, or even really a year ago, when the discussions of breaking off and breaking apart, I just, oh my God, just all the pain from like my parents' divorce just came rushing back, sobbing, and I'm sobbing on the ground because I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna ruin my daughter's life, and that's been a process for me to kind of reach, I guess, this mental state where, you know what, my daughter's going to be perfectly fine if that's the case. If that's the direction we go, she'll be
Hmm.
perfectly fine. I'll be perfectly fine. My wife will be perfectly fine. And we'll move on with our lives, and everything will be fine. You
Yeah.
know,
So let's talk about how you got there, right? Because it's not this one moment, right? And
right?
string of moments together. But can you look back and say, Chris, you're like, okay, when I learned this thing, or I saw this guy's story, or I did this action with my wife, that really kind of created that healthy with the attraction paradox I talked about, where you're like not connected to her anymore, but you still love her. Like, what were some moments where you had these like insights that led to that?
Um, gosh, I mean, I'll have to think about that here for a second, Josh, in terms of specific moments. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is, um, I don't know, man. I need to think about that in terms of specific moments. I mean, it was almost like a light switch went off for me,
Okay.
one day. It was almost kind of like that, where I think I had been, I mean, I had been embedding the content into me over and over and over and over again, um, to where I think one of the biggest insights for me probably was, frame that you talk about, having a very strong, healthy frame. And I noticed that as soon as I started asserting myself in that specific area, like, I noticed an immediate change in her right away, where she could be flipping out, whining or complaining or criticizing me or whatever. And I honestly just learning to just kind of stand still, breathe, to not allow the words to affect me, uh, realizing that she's an emotional creature, and there's no logic. That's one of the other things is the logic versus the emotion, standpoint was another one of the big things for me, where I just said, you know what, I'm going to just stop using I'm going to stop using all logic altogether at all times, and I'm not even going to try to reason. It's funny, like last night, my daughter like had like a breakdown yesterday, and she was just like not being good, and I started analyzing everything logically with my daughter in front of my wife, and my wife went, she just went completely downhill. Like, what are you doing? Why are you criticizing my daughter? And I realized, oh shit. I'm being logical again. I'm approaching this situation from a logical standpoint. I need to shut up and just maintain my calm, listen to what my wife has to say, understand why she's being emotional, and then she's like, "Are you throwing a fit? Are you being like, no, no, perfectly all right. I get it. I understand. I understand why you feel the way you feel." So, I mean, I think some of the interactions where I immediately started making the change mentally from being the emotional guy to or being the logical man to the stoic man made a major difference for my wife for sure, and a major difference for me. And I've maintained that. I mean, it's November 13th. I mean, pretty much probably since mid-August, I guess you could say, where I mean, I've got Irish in me, I've got Scottish in me, I've got all these different, emotional background heritages in me, and learning to kind of just keep that under control and be the rock, I guess you could say. I think I've heard you say that in different, modules or videos. It's just being that rock, and literally just imagining myself as a freaking rock, just sitting there, just being a rock,
Yeah. And I think I'm going to take that and expand on it a little bit because, as I introduce these concepts, it's some men are able to take them and then kind of run with them in their own direction and it kind of veers off course. And so what some guys will do when they hear you say stoic, right? Because concepts and words, we all have our own interpretation of. As much as we can kind of agree pretty much what a word means, we still have our own perception of it. And so a lot of men, when they take this rock or stoic idea, it shows no emotion, right? Just like,
Yeah,
and
right.
that's equated to stonewalling, which is like completely shutting down, which is the
Sure.
worst you can give a woman. So I will say, like, instead of a rock, like a magnetic rock, if you will, right? So
Yeah,
how that looks
yeah.
differently in conversation with her. Yeah, it's bad to be reactive and yell back at her or get emotional yourself, defend yourself, use logic. But when you're being unreactive, which is what we teach, which helps a lot of guys go from blowing up and being feminine, right, to like being more unreactive is better. But taking it to the final echelon is about like leaning in and understanding and having an open heart.
Mm,
As cliche,
yes.
like a lot of guys will close their heart when they're being stoic, and
Hmm.
being able to open her heart, understand how she feels, that's what she's getting back from you. And it shows up in the slightest idiosyncrasies, right? Of how you look at her, right? Like the
Hmm.
vocal tonality
Hmm.
you have, how open your body is. And she picks up on this subtly. So it's also important to say that, like, yes, you're stoic, but also like opened up as well.
Yeah, yeah. That's great, Josh. That is definitely more in line in terms of what I think when I'm thinking of stoic and rock. Because I think of stoicism as like this kind of calm, mature, philosophical, but open type of person. And the rock, the rock analogy, yeah, it's more of like a magnetic rock, like you said, a loving rock. Because
Loving
I feel
rock.
like if yeah, I feel like if you're being if you're just being a closed off rock, you're really just kind of feeling sorry for yourself because you're getting yelled at that point. And that's the other thing is not feeling sorry for myself for any of this thing, for any of the bad. That's definitely one of the things. I think maybe it was the locus of control. That's another I think that you talk about. That was probably another thing that had a paradigm shift for me where I just said, you know what, everything is my fault from a healthy standpoint. And now that everything is my fault from a healthy standpoint, now I can start to make changes to cultivate, to renovate, whatever how I'm feeling and how I'm reacting and how I'm acting. And so I think that was another big shift for me is that taking control and taking extreme ownership, as Jocko says, his book, I guess it is Extreme Ownership, I want to say is the name of it.
Yep.
And yes, so it's like, all right,
We can
well,
talk about that for a second, Chris, because like that's such a man, this victim narrative. Like I showed you about the saboteur score, how my victim was the lowest. We talked about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
There's a whole other side of that we could talk about in our A&B program, but that's something I learned. But anyways, I wanted to just touch on that for a second because when it comes down to it, your wife having a midlife crisis, her going through depression, she's the one that cheated on you. You
Mhm.
can't, it's all perspective. Like there's no hard science for like, is it your fault or hers? No one can, we can debate this to the end of the day. And so because it's all perspective, if we want to make this as logical as possible, when you hold the perspective or the like the belief or software that it's outside of your control, in future situations, you will feel powerless to do anything about it. And when you come from a
Absolutely.
powerless state, you give your power away. Literally, you're giving power away.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
A woman
Yeah. And
doesn't
who
need to
wants
be
to
with
be
a
in
man
that?
that has zero power, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, go ahead. I'm
I was
sorry.
just gonna say, so like it's all perspective. So like going back to like, okay, midlife, maybe she's having a midlife crisis because she's going through divorce. Maybe she cheated on you because of the years of neglect. And like when
Right.
you look at it and it's yeah, it hurts more up front, but in future
Mhm.
situations, you feel powerful to have influence over the situation.
Right. Exactly. And I think going through what I went through with my ex as well. Um, I mean, I became so powerless in that. I became such a
Yeah.
blame game guy, feeling sorry for myself. And I think as things started deteriorating again, it was like, okay, well, Chris, do you want to go down that path again of being the blame game, or do you want to have the locus of control? Do you want to take ownership, take extreme ownership, and start making changes to yourself, for yourself, by yourself, with a team, obviously, and with a group.
Mhm.
And yeah, so the victimhood mentality is just, I mean, I think my score was like 1.2 or whatever it was. I can't do it. I can't do it. It's against who I am fundamentally. And although I have slipped into it. I mean, like I said, I fell into a drugs and alcohol pattern there for a few years, which is like the ultimate victimhood mentality outlet, I guess you could say. And I refuse to go back to that. I refuse to go back to that. And uh, you know, uh, I'd rather wake up each day, meditate, and feel gratitude, for my wife and for the shit. I was going through a rough thing yesterday, and a friend of mine kind of talked to a friend of mine, and he kind of reminded me. He's like, "Dude, you got to be grateful for all the good and the bad, and because you get to feel that
How
energy."
do you do that? How do you do that, Chris? Because like someone listening to this right now will be like, I'm going through hell. You've been there, Chris, right? So like,
Yeah.
how do you shift your perspective to have gratitude for the bad things?
Yeah, I think you have to have an internal determination that nothing happens to you and everything happens for you. And you have to decide, well, you have to look at maybe the worst situation in your life or the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and then also look at it as Tony Robbins teaches. And I know you're a Tony Robbins guy. How can now look at the worst thing that's ever happened to you and see it as the best thing that's ever happened to you? Well, now you start to do that and start to find a way to make your mind shift into seeing it as the best thing the worst thing that's ever happened to you. How do you turn that into the best thing? Well, your mind, you start thinking about it, you start to find a way. Well, this obstacle came to grow me. This obstacle came to change me into a better man. These horrible things that have happened have given me an opportunity. Thank you for this opportunity to shift and to grow into a better version of myself. And it's hard to do, obviously. I mean, but you ultimately, I think we as men, we have to ultimately make the decision: what type of man do we want to be? Do we want to be the victim man, or do we want to be the overcomer man?
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself that question: how is this the best thing that's ever happened to me, actually? And then if you start answering that question, and maybe you write it down. I don't know. I mean, I've done so many different things to kind of get to this point. Whether it's practicing gratitude or forgiveness. I don't know, Josh. I don't know if I'm butchering the answer on this one or not, but
I would interrupt you if you were. No, you're absolutely on point. And
I'm trying to think of the best words to say
well,
to a
that's
man.
the thing is like the quality of the question determines the quality of our life. I think that is Tony Robbins. I'm not sure who's the first one to say it, but when a lot of guys they're going through a tough situation with their wife and they're asking, "What do I say? What do I do?" the better question to ask yourself is, what kind of man do you want to be throughout this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That's good.
And then
Yeah.
like,
It's,
okay, because we could start there, right? It's like, okay, I want to be a man that respects myself. I want to be a man that you start leaning on your values, and those values
mhm.
serve as signposts and how to navigate your way through life, right? And it's like, if I
Right.
value honesty as much as it's going to hurt her, it's going to be a painful conversation. If that's what I truly value. I am going to confront that internal fear, that demon, right? And I'm going to just throw it out there and be honest for myself, no matter let the chips fall where they may. And
Yeah.
as much as it, again, we're talking about hurting on the front end, but like on the long end, like whether you're religious or not, whoever's listening to this, it's like I think that's like it's I don't want to get too preachy here, but I really do think you're taking a step closer to heaven when you are honest with yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. I mean, I've got a, quote unquote religious background, so to speak, and I believe in faith. And, going through what I've gone through with the drugs and alcohol and going through the steps, you can interpret it as a power higher than yourself, I guess, as they say. And whatever your interpretation of that power is whatever your interpretation of it is. But absolutely, I mean, it's faith and ultimately it's just faith and fear. You can feed fear and victimhood and selfishness and fall apart and end up where I ended up with, a drunken, drugged out hole, or you can take ownership, take extreme ownership, and realize that you're also connected to the solution to all your problems, which is yourself as well. And that's I mean that's what I have chosen to do. I've already been through the victimhood. Like I said, I don't want to go through that crap again. I'd rather spend each day looking at each day as an opportunity and as a gift, each moment as a gift, every morning getting to wake up and just sit there and meditate and just kind of pray, stay connected to the higher power, and doing things like gratitude, writing down 10 things that I'm grateful for every single day, and then spending 10 minutes, 1 minute on each item, and truly feeling gratitude, truly feeling grateful for whatever that thing is, whether it's, a freaking taco, or whether it's my wife, whether it's my daughter, or whether it's, I don't know. I achieved something in business or whatever. It could be, I mean, the smallest thing. Oh, the sky's blue today. I'm grateful for that. And I just think that
Mhm.
that makes such a mental shift in terms of not just myself, but it creates just an you know, not to get too woo-woo-y, but the energy field around you. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of men that are into that or get that or believe
More
in
than you
that,
would
but
think, more than you would think, actually. Yeah.
yeah.
Like guys
Yeah.
are tapping into that. And this is probably the hardest for someone to grasp who's going through it, which is like, imagine yourself being grateful when she's yelling at you. And you're
Yeah.
just like, I feel grateful that this woman is able to express her honest emotions with me and open up to me and share her
Yeah.
pain, even if it's coming off as anger or even like just whatever the emotion.
Snidey. Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, Josh, because I mean, there is something worse than that. The, her not giving a shit, being totally indifferent, that is worse. And I feel bad for the men that are in that situation. I mean, she did reach that point with me where she did say to me, like, and this was well previous, where she was like, I just don't give a shit anymore, Chris. I'm just at the point I don't care. And yeah, when she started yelling at me again, I was like, oh, okay. All right, things are looking up. It's like, all right, things are starting to improve.
I
And
don't know. I don't know if this would work with your wife because I talk about how to pass tests and how humor is like the highest paradigm of that. But if like when she's yelling at you, just be like, I just love how much you care about me. What the
I she was yelling at me. This was back in August. And she was yelling at me one night, and I just looked at her, stayed calm. I just looked at her dead in the eye and I go, "Don't worry, sweetie. Uncle Chris is here. Uncle Chris is here. It's gonna be okay." And she just died laughing and like started like hitting me, at that point. And I was like, okay, that's progress right there, you
And
know?
that
So,
exactly, because like what do most men do when she's upset? They fall into her frame, right? They get upset
right,
too. That's yeah,
right.
that's falling off.
Yeah. So, yeah. So definitely the locus of control, the frame, you asked me about two of the,
Yes, being having the
yeah,
yeah, all these frameworks that we put into the program.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, man, I really appreciate you, Chris, and I'm looking forward to our next call on the A&B stuff. I'm sure it's been going
Yeah,
well.
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Is there anything else? I always ask this last question to guys on these calls, which is like, let's get back, let's go back a year, right? And you're gonna tell yourself something that he needed to hear in that moment to help him move forward. What would it be?
Do the do the freaking work. Like, don't quit. Keep going forward. Like, do the freaking work and push yourself to complete what you've started. So I think that's the biggest thing.
And one last thing I'll say on that too is like, there's a really good book I've been rereading. I read it in the darkest moment of my life, to be honest. It's called The Undefeated Mind. I'm not sure if mentioned it to you guys, by
Ah,
Alex Herman. And he just shares a study about purpose. And we talk about
mhm.
purpose a lot. We talked about it, but like in the study, essentially, people who had a purpose for the reason that they were doing, they like double the persistence of whatever
Yeah,
task they were doing, right? If they
yeah,
had a higher reason for why they were doing it. I mean, he who has a why to live can bear almost any hell. It's Friedrich Nietzsche. And so it's like finding the reason why you're doing this and not like 4K, like I always say this too, there's like echelons to it. A guy who's doing it for his kids is actually the lowest echelon, right?
mm,
I would say maybe like for like for like actually the face, like, oh, it's for the so people don't judge us. I don't want to be shamed. That's the lowest paradigm. For the
yeah,
kid is a little bit higher.
yeah,
For the
yeah,
her, because she's your soulmate or she's the one for yourself is always the
yeah.
high. Right.
If I could add one other thing that in terms of the paradigm shift, that was it also for me. In realizing I'm doing all these changes because when I started a year ago, I was doing it for her. And then when I restarted again this year, I was doing it for me. Um, all the changes that I'm making are for me. And I constantly, even if I'm doing something and I'm constantly looking at, I mean, it kind of sounds kind of selfish, but I'm looking I'm looking on how to improve myself constantly. And if I go and get a coffee, okay, I used to want to get her a coffee so that she would approve of me. And now it's just like, you know what? I'm going to just get you a coffee because I want to get you a coffee. There you
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Because like, and you're not
Yeah.
even like, I mean,
And I don't care about
you
the,
could say it's a
yeah.
corporate contract to expecting a thank you, but like I would personally, my corporate contract is I just want you to say thank you. But like,
Yeah, and that's the other thing is I just said, you know what? If I do something nice for her, it's not about getting a thank you anymore. It used to be about that. And it used to be about, okay, hey, I did this for you. Now you have to give me sex. Now it's just I'm gonna just do something nice for you just because I want to do something nice for you. And whether you thank me or not, doesn't even make a difference. I don't need the appreciation or the thank you or the validation anymore. I'm going to just do it because it makes me feel good to do something for you. And that's all I need in the process. So,
so from just we're done completely, like we're never having sex again, don't touch me, to like where you are at now and it's only getting better. And Chris, like this honestly, like it was one of the best calls I've ever had with a guy when it comes to like just encapsulating everything in the program. So thank you so much,
cool.
man. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
man. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you, brother.